After a huge round 13, we are into the legendary Origin 1 week, a week that's very important for fantasy coaches, a week that could represent potentially injuries, guys who are arrested next week, opportunities for other guys to step up. But let's look back at round 13 for a second here, Biz. Of your week, there are a lot of great scorers in your team, but was there anyone in particular that stood out as a bit of a pod that has paid off in this last bye round?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it was Bailey Simonson. Hyped him up a few weeks ago. He's been pretty good the last few weeks. He's averaged about 40, 45 over the last few weeks. He's got really low ownership, like less than 1%. He tackle busted his way to a mid-40s score last week, and his partner, Sean Russell, on the other side for the Eels, both low ownership, held him, scored a try and got a mid-40s score as well. So not the highest scores, but seeing those two play well on Friday night with Cowboys going down against the Eels as well was a pretty nice sight. What about you?
That's prime time. I'm going to go with a couple of Eels as well. Greig posted a 53 for me, or 52. He was millimeters for another try as well. So that was nearly a 70-point performance for him in the middle, which I got on board at 248K, and he's past 400K now, which is pretty unexpected. He always had that upside, but yeah, he's just grown into a great role at Parramatta, and there's been a lot of injuries. And the other guy is Dylan Brown. He's just been firing in the last month.
No bias here. No para bias whatsoever. Hey, apparently the comment section said you look like Wiramu, so there you go.
Whatever para player plays well that week is what I get. When Ray Stone won the game for us last year, I was getting Ray Stone. I was getting Fergo back in the day. He wasn't playing that great, but I'll take any footy player comparison at this point. Let's go into the buy, hold, sell here, though. So we got a pretty tight video. We got buys, cash, cows, holds, and sells. Just classic format this week. And we'll jump right into buys here. Jacob Kiraz is a guy we've talked about a lot. Look, with Kiraz, the thing to note here is he had his buy last week. He's going to play round 16 and round 19, which are your major buy rounds. He misses round 17. So just go have a look at that if you're not sure, because the Dogs, the Sharks, and the Tigers miss that game. And if you go into your NRL app and you go to fixtures, you can go to round 17 and have a look. But you probably have a few players from those teams. So that's the one thing that's holding me back from Kiraz, just because I have a lot of those guys. But at 469K, he's serious value, and he could easily get past 700K at some point this year.
Yeah, that's good analysis and good call on the buys. I think the round 16, 17, 19 buy schedule is the trickiest by far, because the teams that play both 16 and 19, which are the Tigers, Sharks, and Dogs, like you said, they all miss 17. So if you let up on those guys, you're going to be struggling in round 17. So just be careful on that. But I think the thesis on Kiraz hasn't changed. He's a tackle-busting, attacking winger, and Dogs getting their troops back slowly over the mid-course of the season should fire. Next guy is a bit different. He's Jake Turpin. Now, unfortunately, the Cheese has gone down with a reasonably medium to long-term injury. He's not expected to be back till round 19. Jake Turpin comes into this starting hooker role, and only Drew Hutchison on the bench, who isn't a noted big-minute hooker. Now, Jake Turpin could see 55, 60 minutes like the Cheese, or he could even play longer minutes than that, because unlike the Cheese, Turpin's more of a game manager. He has the ability to play longer minutes. He doesn't go as hard as Cheese does. Like Cheese plays like a dynamo, like a rocket. He'll just go hard for 55 minutes, gas himself out. But Turpin will play a bit more controlled footy, not as electric, but he'll make his tackles. Like when he plays 60, 70, 80 minutes, he can be a 50 average guy. And Longy, I think you said that when he plays 60 plus minutes, he averages 49. But even if he plays 50, 55 minutes, which is what the Cheese was getting, he's a 35 to 40 point guy. And at 337K, that's a lot of value. And for those of you who don't have a hooker for round 16, he'll be there. So he's going to be in my team this week because I have Damien Cook, who doesn't play round 16. And at that value, I think he's pretty much a must-have.
Yeah, perfect foil to Damien Cook owners. I like that option. Isaiah Papali'i is the next one, and he's one of those guys that we're talking about. Round 16, round 19, he plays. He'll miss round 17. Look out for that. I've got Jacob Preston sitting in the back row already, who I want to hold through that period. So it's a bit tricky for me, but 706K, there's upside and downside to this. So upon first glance, I looked at this a couple of weeks ago and just thought, yep, done deal, slam dunk, easy option, Isaiah Papali'i. As I've thought about it more, I still think there's not any risk in that price, but I'm a bit less confident in him rising up, just because Papa's not really getting those attacking stats. And he's not getting, when you watch the Tigers games, they're not targeting him in great attacking positions. The game's not being built around him the way it was at Parramatta, which is a bit weird because at Parramatta, there are so many good attacking options in that team, and there are so many guys that could take ball off Papali'i, but Parramatta made sure he had 10 try-scoring chances a game. Whereas at the Tigers, when there's a good chance, it worked for them against the Cowboys, but they just love to chuck it out the back or throw a risky pass and generally don't hold that possession long enough for Papali'i to work his way into a spot. So I am a little low on the upside for Papali'i, but I still do think with the bye schedule and with his work rate, he's value there, but I'm just capping the ceiling a bit.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, look, being an owner all year, I started the season with Papali'i, but he looks like a 55 guy just on base stats. I haven't seen that big attacking upside game yet. And you're right. Like, I'm not really too sure why they signed him as the marquee, not to really use him. They go to Bateman a lot. And I've seen Alex Twal given more crash ball opportunities near the line than Papali'i, which is it's very strange to me. But another guy who's got the similar buy schedule and is available in the second row is Nikora. Now, he's been going great this year. He's not really a gun traditionally, but this year he's really taken the fantasy step up and he's looking like a mid-50s average player. Unlike Papali'i, he's actually getting a lot of attacking stats this year, scoring a lot of tries, making a lot of line breaks, and the form of the Hines, Moylan, and Kennedy combination really adds to that. They look really sleek out the back, so it's creating a lot of space for that crash or good line that he runs, and he's just breaking the line. So he's a really good pod option who's actually been very consistent in terms of a lot of 50-plus scores, and he's balancing his 30s with 70-plus games, which is why he has the high average this year. So he's one to watch, and yeah, another good edge option for your side that plays both 16 and 19, but again, misses 17.
Yeah. It's tough with those two because they're actually a great one to have next to each other. You've got fantasy pedigree with Papali'i and a really strong base, and you have form and explosiveness this year and team situation for Nikora. So what do you value there? Historically, I lean towards the fantasy pedigree personally because I think there's just more room to grow. Whereas for a guy like Nikora, there's more room to fall. But at the same time, Nikora could outscore Papali'i for the rest of the year. So it really comes down to your preferences. The last guy we're going to throw on here is Eli Katoa, and he's on the edge too. It's not fair to compare him to these boys because he's 150 to 200K cheaper than both these options. But for Katoa, the thing we're pointing to here is look at that early season form for Katoa. Look at that first sort of 7-8 weeks, and then take out the last month of footy where he had a couple of injuries. There were a couple of challenges at the Storm, a few playmaker changes. He had some lower scores, but he seems to be bouncing back to that previous form. So you've got some really good buys at Melbourne. His next buy is round 19. He does play round 17, which makes him more attractive to a lot of coaches. And at 553K, he's probably value because if the Storm start clicking, he's the kind of guy that could get into that 700K conversation as well on raw explosiveness and a decent attacking base.
Yeah, he's a fun one to own as well. Like I think most of the coaches at the start of the year had him. Be fun to get him back, and he's still value at 550K.
Yeah, he's a hot one. Next guys, we've got cash cows. Look, these are the real value boys. A lot of the cash cows here are ones that either you probably have if you've been watching the show for a while, or they're risky. So there isn't really that slam dunk cash cow for this week. There might be next week. And we are going to talk about one of those guys right now. I'm going to really quickly.
I don't know about that. I think Carl, I'll let you talk about Carl, but I think he could be a bit of a slam dunk cash cow.
The reason I disqualify him is because I think everyone has him.
Sorry,
I've been saying
I don't have him, so I've been waiting for this. Thanks for making me look bad, mate.
Was I shaming you there? I've been saying by Kyle Oloapu since like his second game. Just you got to back the talent. He's been slowly raising in money. Look, he's 293K. This is probably the last week where he's a real cash cow. He then sort of grows into that next category of low to mid 300s. But for him, he's scoring great. If you extrapolate his scores across 80 minutes, it's usually going to be about 35 to 40 points. That's with him finding his place in first grade. So you look at a guy like Katoa who's come in. He's not at that pedigree level over his first month of footy. Oloapu is at a different level. So if you don't have him, he should be the first guy you buy this week, in my eyes. I'll throw
him or Turpin. Him or Turpin this week? If you only had
Him.
one to pick one.
100% Oloapu. Just because Turpin won't raise by as much money. I don't think. Turpin has questions around minutes, so you can see the answer to those questions.
Yeah.
And Turpin is a bit less secure as well. I think Oloapu's just got more of a solid spot there.
No,
But I'll throw Taafe at you next because I know you're a bit of a Taafe fan. Minimum price or 1K away from it.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm a tough fan, but he does serve a job for your team. At
The one guy
220k,
who talks about Taafe though, that's
I
you know
know,
what I mean.
but I mean, like
Taafe.
he's a guy that will play multiple games over the Origin period. We've already seen Latrell pull out Origin, which is terrible news for Blues fans. But he's not going to play Origin this week. His availability for the weekend is very suspect, and most people would know that a calf injury is one of those injuries that always have like lingering issues. And if you combine that with his hamstring issues that he had at the start of the year, I can't see Latrell backing up. So there's a chance that you get Taafe for 4 or 5 games over the next 5-6 weeks. And look, he's not a noted fantasy scorer. So I'm not telling you go get Taafe. He's going to be 500k after 4 or 5 games. But he could just, honestly, like you probably just trade him in and you have him in your side for the rest of the year as a red dot, like a potential loop option. Or you just hope he gets 170 odd score where he scores a hat trick when Souths get on a roll and you can get his price up to 400, then it's worth trading him out. But the most
you called this
realistic
too, by the way. I'll give some credit.
Last
week you said Blake Taft's that guy where Latrell probably picks up a niggle and he gets to play in the major buy rounds, so 13 and 19, and also every round where Latrell went back up. So you were on that. I don't know if you went to training and sort of cut a dividend for Latrell, but genuinely,
I'm a massive Latrell fan. I would never do that to him. But I mean, the problem with Taafe is sucks. Yeah, terrible news. But the problem with Taafe is he's just not a great scorer. Like he could just be 25 times 5, and that's like man, it's not even worth bringing in for that. So you got to just analyze his scores and think if you can bust out a couple of big ones, look at the Souths draw, see if there's any easier matchups for him to really dominate. But at 220k, if you're just going to cash out the plays this week, like I'm thinking about it because I've got Burbo, Ponga, Simonson, Russell in my back 5 all out this week. Honestly, like a Burbo to Taafe trade just to get a player in for some of these rounds is somewhat appealing. So could be an option for me.
Yeah, and you loophole him, you see what happens. Because they did have a tough Canberra game last week, and Canberra was basically full strength. So it's a hard one to reflect on for him. Next guy I'm going to throw in here is Jaden Okunbor. And this is a really weird one to have on this list.
Very strange.
Actually, 365k it makes me uncomfortable. Because he's just seriously, the Dogs keep doing this. They just have these guys that are not options that we should be looking at. And they creep up to the mid 300s, and then we find out about them and sort of talk about them. So, don't let Oloapu do that to you. Go by him. But for Okunbor, he scored tries the last 2 weeks. He's played 50-plus minutes the last 2 weeks. He's named to start this week. Now, whether he does actually start is a question mark. I wouldn't guarantee that. But if Okunbor was in the 200s, I'm probably doing it. In the 300s, there's just that much risk. His scoring profile isn't fantastic as a forward unless he can keep scoring tries, which maybe he can. I mean, I don't know if there are that many tries to go around in the Dogs pack. There's just a lot of question marks for me at 365k, but he could be that monster pod that pops off potentially for someone. Do you have any consideration at all for Okunbor at that 365k mark?
Look, I totally agree with you. If he was sub 300, I could do it because, like I said, I need a fullback this week. But at 365, if you look through the lens and you take out the tries the last 2 weeks, he's playing 50 minutes in the middle for like 25 points. Even if he starts on the edge, unless he's getting 80, it's probably not. He's probably going to score like the low 30s at best, unless he keeps scoring tries. And I don't think the Dogs are that good a team where, an in and out first grader is scoring tries every week. Like, you can maybe look back at Okunbor when he started and he ran over Cameron Smith like 5 times in a game. If that's what you think he is in reality, then maybe go for it. But I've seen enough from him over the last couple of years that I just don't really believe it at 365k. Could eat with my words, but I would probably skip.
It's a mad dog move. It's an absolute mad dog move if you do it. Sammy Fainu, and look, he's on bye this week, but I really wanted to put him in here just because I think we have to talk about him. He's a guy who's posted a high 40s score in very good minutes last week. Oloapu was playing in that game. Obviously, Tuolangi is 4 weeks away right now. Ben Trbojevic is 4 weeks away right now. They have the bye this week, so there's probably only really 3 games left until those guys are back. But Fainu, on merit, just from that one game, he looked really solid to me. So if you need a cash out, I mean, we're talking about guys like Taafe and all that, but Fainu looks like that, like of this list and of the guys that we talk about as sub 200k options. He looks like the guy who could potentially get up to that 500k mark if he can cement that spot. So, yeah, I think he's kind of tricky, but I'll be waiting a week.
We said that like a couple of weeks ago was it last week? A couple of weeks ago that Fainu could be gangbusters based on how he plays. And we spoke about that Kama Tuolangi is not really, an out-and-out first grader, and he hasn't played that well this year to lock that spot. And, we didn't know too much about Fainu, but we asked him, to leave some comments. And there was a couple of comments highlighting that Fainu is a pretty, highly regarded Manly player. And then he played really well in the preseason. He looked the goods last week. And if he plays like that again next week, then he could probably keep Tuolangi out. And Burbo hasn't ever really set the world alight starting the second row either. So he could be one that just keeps that spot as like a 45 average second row for the rest of the year. So, he is pretty interesting for next week, to be honest. And he plays around 16 as well.
It's cheeky with him too. He's 19.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah,
he's massive. He's a monster. Yeah.
Yeah. You could say both ways, right? Like Manly need to win games to make the finals. So they're going to pick their best team, but he's 19, so maybe they manage his minutes, or maybe they were just not sure what they had, and now they know.
I agree with that. It's really tricky because I'm a Couchman owner, and he's 19 as well, and they kind of manage him as well. Like they gave him a rest a few weeks ago, brought him back, had his best game last week, scored a try, and now they rest him again. Like they're not really reliable players, these 19-year-olds.
Yeah, that's the risk. There's a lot to it. And then the last guy here is Anthony Milford. Look, Milford's a guy who can average in the 40s if he's playing that dominant half role. That's the only reason I'm adding to this list. 372k. If he keeps that role, then he's a guy who's definitely value. The question is whether he keeps that role. So this week, Cody Nikora is named at fullback. Hamiso obviously owns that spot. Cody's been playing fantastic footy, and I don't think they drop Isaiah Katoa either. So Milford could go back to the bench. From a purely Dolphins perspective, do you see Milford holding a starting spot in this team, or do you think that Nikora and Katoa is the future there?
Yeah, it's tricky because Milford had a really good game last week, as you said. But Nikora has been going really well over the last few weeks. He's getting like 2+ try assists every week. If you are a Nikora owner, you'd see statistically he's putting out good scores, and that's the back of really good attacking stats. And he's formed a really nice combination with Connolly down the left side. So I'm not really too sure how Milford fits into this equation. And I don't see him staying there myself. But if he has another game like last week, and look, the fact that they're moving Nikora to fullback versus someone like Milford, or, moving like an Osako out there, means that they might be wanting to get Milford in that half role to get him out there. Because I think most people would have been predicting Osako to fullback and, like a Robert Jennings to wing, or like a Valencia or something. So,
yeah,
exactly. So, yeah, look, I don't see it, but it wouldn't surprise me that if he has another great game this week, that he holds the spot.
The cheeky thing with Milford too, and we'll go fantasy, then we'll go Bennett. So Milford had about 470 kick meters in that last game. For fantasy, that's fantastic. Obviously, for a 372k half who can run the ball and produce an attacking stat. But for Wayne Bennett, if you're looking at their roster that they assembled, Sean O'Sullivan was obviously the number 7. Cody Nikorima is not anything like Sean O'Sullivan. He's not in that sort of category at all. Anthony Milford can play a discount Sean O'Sullivan role in this team. So if Bennett's wanting to go back to what they're going to be playing in the finals and that kind of structure for Katoa, then Milford's probably the guy to have alongside Katoa. Whereas with Nikorima, Katoa was stepping up, doing a lot more, but he has to be that leading 7. So that could be playing on Bennett's mind. You never really know. And Bennett hasn't seemed to reward the explosive performances as much either. Like you look at Valence Tavares, he comes in, he's dropped back for Branko Lee. Maybe Cody Nikorima's explosive performances will be dropped back for the squad structure that they want instead. But really, it could be anything.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really interesting point. Bennett does prefer players who do their role and, mistake-free, good defensive football. So, that if he thinks Milford fills in that role a bit better than Nikorima, then no, I agree with you. The only thing is, I guess the one positive about having Nikorima there, having Katoa as a dominant playmaker, is it's accelerated Katoa's growth and made him a better player, taking that responsibility. But yeah, no, your argument's good. I didn't think about it that way, so that's a good way of thinking about it. And yeah, it could be something to consider.
I mean, there's so many variables. we don't know. We just throw out sort of our thoughts, and everyone has to make their own call on it. But look, next group here, before we go into the holds section, we've got sells. So guys you need to get rid of. Look, pretty straightforward list here. First one here, Latrell, and look, I'll jump on a few of these. I'll throw some to you, but Latrell, easy option. Look, he's got that injury. It could be more than a week. He could be back sooner. You don't know, but at 742k and with the South Sydney buy schedule, the upside just isn't there with keeping Latrell. So every reason we said to buy Blake Taaffe is a reason to sell Latrell, basically here. Next guy, Isaiah Katoa. And we talked about that as well. There's a risk there that with Milford back, and you saw it last week, Milford's going to eat up a lot of those kick meters. He's going to be that dominant half. Katoa will rely on attacking stats, which he historically hasn't really produced. 421k is the highest price you're going to sell him for this year. He's out. Any other thoughts on those two guys, or do you want to jump right over to Hamiso?
No, you've nailed them on the head. I'll take Hamiso. I think, look, Bennett's revealed his hand that he's not going to get his origin players backing up. So Hammer's going to miss a few games over the next 5 to 6 weeks. And at 510k, he's pretty much peaked as well. I think his scoring has been on a downward trajectory for 5-6 weeks. And longer, like if we could go back to our buy hold sells, we had Hammer as a sell in like week 5 or 6. And you said you thought that was the highest price Hammer would be, which was the mid 500s, close 600, I think. And your prediction is coming to look true. He had a gangbuster start to the year, and he looks like he's cooling off. He is that dual position player, which makes it hard to sell him. But at 510k and not performing as strongly and playing Origin, not looking to back up, missing a bunch of games, I think there's some good options there at the 500, 600k mark that you can be moving him on for.
Yeah, and he's a great example of not just looking at the average of the player, but looking at the stat profile. So can we rely on Hamiso's stat profile? Start of the year, it was some pretty good run meters, obviously, but generally the base for him isn't as good. He's not doing that sort of hard work kind of stuff like a Dylan Edwards does. He was relying on tries and try assists and those big attacking plays. So you can normally assume that unless someone has the Tommy Turbo season of last year, that they're probably not going to keep up that rate and they'll regress. And yeah, Hamiso has definitely regressed. Jackie Bird's the next one here, and he's a tricky one because he's been scoring great for fantasy. I have no concerns at all about his fantasy production. 688k is a fine price for him. There'd be people who would probably buy him if he wasn't dealing with this knee soreness issue. And he had that game off a couple of weeks ago. He's now having probably 2 weeks off as well. And then he has the round 16 bye. So you're probably getting a 3-week resting here for a knee soreness issue that's ruled him out before and saw him play 55 minutes last week. It's just too much money to have in a guy who is going to get rested through this period. And either the Dragons have given up on making the finals or this injury is much worse than we've heard. or Jack Bird's just not important to their finals push. I think it's the second option there. But this is a pretty tough knee soreness issue he's dealing with. So, yeah, get rid of him. You can buy a bunch of guys. I mean, look, we haven't talked about Joey Manu being back, but he plays around 16. You could go Bird to Manu straight away. He's in the 6 jersey. He'll probably do well this week. There's a bunch of guys available.
Yeah, that's a good call. And the one thing about Bird is, like, the things I'd like to add is history of knee injuries is not great for someone who's being managed for a knee injury right now. They've got enough second rowers and middles out there, maybe not any superstars, but enough first graders or fringe first graders out there where he probably doesn't need to play 80 minutes. And if he's not getting 80 minutes on the edge, he's not worth 700K. And the last thing is, I think I've seen quite a few articles saying that Bird is one of those players who is, quite tied in with Anthony Griffin, and he was looking to move on if there was a new coach and some uncertainty. So I wonder if this is kind of playing into that. Whereas if this was, if it wasn't for a new coach, he might still be playing through it. So just that and the whole load management concept, like, I just don't know if he's coming back to a 80-minute edge role anytime soon. And like you said, at that price, I just wouldn't risk it. Like, I can just see myself trading him to Manu and then getting Bird back in like 5 weeks as well. It's just a part of the center roller coaster. You got to live with it. That's what the centers are like in fantasy every year.
And we'll see if we need him. Lemuelu might just keep the form up as well. There might be other guys. Alamotti might become a keeper. That's what I'm hoping for.
That would be nice.
Probably not. And then, look, Benny Trbojevic is the last one. Look, he's out for another 4 weeks, at least there. So, and he's not really a big fantasy scorer. He's probably not as good as Fainu after the game on the weekend, in my eyes. Yeah, I think that's a pretty straightforward one. Don't rush it. He's 220K, but if you can make a move, go make a move with Ben Trbojevic. Last group here is the holds, and these are some interesting ones because a couple of these could be guys you're looking at buying. I'd probably argue against buying these guys here. I think a lot of the upside's gone, but I'll throw Luki in first. So with Luki, he's weird. Like, he'll come out and score you 17, then he'll go score 80, then he'll score 19, then he'll score 60. Like, it's very tough to predict what Luki's going to do, and he can score well in a loss and score poorly in a win as well. So it's not necessarily just a fixture-based thing. Look, at 543K, the upside isn't there unless he goes on a transcendent run. And the other risk there is that Jeremiah Nanai comes back this week on the bench, allegedly, too. I think the reshuffle there could be that Nanai comes into the starting spot and that we see Luciano Leilua go into the middle role and Granville is now starting lock for the week. That's how I see the potential.
Every time you say that, I just can't stop laughing.
He just can't be the starting lock every week. Like, he's a great tackler, but you can't do it. Like, they're used to having Taumalolo and Cotter in that role. You need a ball runner, and Luciano is that guy. But look for Luki. The tough thing, I was actually talking with Paulie on NRL.com, and he was talking about Luki's fixtures, and the Cowboys don't play early, like, ever, pretty much coming forward. So you can't even really loophole Luki because he would be a perfect loophole option, but they play late in the round every week. So, yeah, he's a tough one. I have him. I'm going to hold him. I'm a bit pessimistic about him going forward. I think I'll end up selling him for the mid to high 500s. I just don't think he's got that much more in him, but we'll see what happens with him.
Yeah, the Cowboys team, look, when they're all back at full strength, it's pretty stacked. Like, you've got Taumalolo and Cotter in that lock role. You've got Leilua and Nanai, who I think are their best two edges. And then you've got Luki, and even Jack Kasevsky's playing really well. And they've got the young boy Kenio as well. So there's just a lot of good forwards there. So I'm not too sure. Luki could be a 45, 55-minute guy. And, based on his profile, it's still probably like 60, 20, 15, 70. So who knows?
Yeah. And then Granville? Are you, like, if you don't have him, do you?
I sold him a couple of weeks ago because I had Cook at hooker for round 13. So I didn't really need. You can't play two hookers, but
He just got that middle.
He got that middle, and that's a stupid thing. I wish they had the dual positions last week rather than after the bye round. But you know,
They
what
should
can
do it
you
every
do?
week, really. Like,
Yeah,
if there's a guy who's
should be
named to start
rolling.
in a spot and it's not just a ridiculous desperation
Uh,
play,
I
which it
just
wasn't for Granville. He's been playing only middle all year.
yeah, these like 3-4 times a year dual position changes are I love playing fantasy now, so I don't like talking bad about the developers or whatnot, but it is one of those nonsensical rules that needs to be changed ASAP.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's for a different topic. We should do a video on rules we'd like changed, maybe.
We will do a
Um,
video today about the guys who have gotten that change done. But
yeah,
rules we want changed, that'd be juicy. Maybe post-season. I'm sure they'd
yeah,
invite us in.
yeah, for sure. But Granville, I think you definitely hold him. He's got the dual position now, low break even, coming off a few good scores. Look, Tamalolo back hurts him, but you might as well just run him to the round 16 by, and then he'll peak in price at that point as well. And then you can sell him for 450, 500K. So if you bought him at 250s, you're laughing, made 200K. So pretty happy with that. Greig, I'll leave Greig to you. You love him, your boy.
Being a Greig owner has been the best experience ever. Like I talked about it at the start, but yeah, got him at 248. He's now on 405. Post that 50 plus score. Look, with him, Offa Hangawi getting injured in the first 10 minutes, it's not good for Parramatta, which is tough for us as Parramatta fans, but it's good for Greig. It's good for his scoring. He's just going to keep getting minutes. Look, Regan Campbell-Gillard's back round 18. Ryan Madison's back round 16. Offa Hangawi, it's undetermined, but it's a calf injury, so I'm going to call it after round 16. And then, Junior Paulo, he plays every Origin game. He plays a big role in the Blues team. His backing up will be, I would say, somewhat paced. He'll probably have to go into a pretty big role, but he's not going to play more than 50 minutes backing up for Parramatta either. So there's just minutes for Greig. That's the thing with him. And obviously, there's no game this week, so you're going to have to deal with that this week. But going forward, he's going to get big minutes in the major buy rounds, which he plays all of. And any chance he gets in one of those backing up games, he's going to go well too. And he's now getting that attacking upside coming to his game too. So I don't know what price it's going to be. I'm sort of forecasting him at. He went up about 50K last week. I'm still only forecasting him at about 500K. I don't think I'll sell him for much more than that. But yeah, no, he's been nice to own. I'm just going to hang on.
I honestly think there's a path where he can get to 600 if you hold him to around 20, because Parramatta don't really start getting their troops back to around 17, 18. And Greig has shown that he can handle bigger minutes. I don't think the coach trusts him to play more than 25, 30 minutes, but he has arguably been our best forward the last 3-4 weeks, and he showed he could handle the 50-minute role last week. So if he keeps playing 45, 50 minutes, because I looked at his stats in reserve grade last year, and he has some fantasy pedigree. He was making 200 meters a game in Reddy's last year, playing 55 odd minutes. So if he gets 45, 50 minutes here, I can't see why he can't average 40 plus and get close to 600K. So, look, I guess if you believe that, you buy him. So I don't fully believe that, but that's my, upside scenario. I reckon he could be a 35 to 40 guy, but not enough for true trades. But if you have him, brilliant. Great call.
As a buy right now, that's risky.
No, I wouldn't do it unless you were really bullish on him. Because he's scoring.
You were on last week at 350. That might have been
at 400, probably not. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, look, he is a bit attacking script reliant as well. He's not going to score that great if Parramatta don't have the ball, because he's doing that same thing. He's running 100 to 200 meters pretty much every week. He's now getting a few offloads and tackle breaks, those sort of attacking plays into his stat line as well. He's probably not the defensive work rate guy. So if Parramatta are on the back foot and defending all game, he'll get very tired very quickly, and he doesn't make that many tackles. So if you have that kind of game, he's not going to be the best. We'll throw Luke Metcalf in next. And I bought Luke Metcalf last week.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yes.
Okay. That's cool.
I was pumped. He was pumping Sean Johnson about 30 minutes in. He was on, I think it was 29 points after 35 minutes. So he was looking really good. He ended up on 27, which was not as good. But I just think he's, we were talking about it last week, and I kind of talked myself into it as we were talking about it. I just think he's a bit of a freak. And I think for the Warriors, they need a bit of that because they've got a good forward pack, and their backs are playing better than they should be. And they just, they got Charles Nickel-Clockstad. He's really solid. They got Wade Egan, who's doing a really good job for them. Sean Johnson's playing career best footy at the moment. But they need someone at number 6 role who can break a game open. And I think Metcalf's that guy and can be that guy by the end of the year when they're in the finals. So I just think he's going to keep that role. And I think he's going to have some big upside games. And his low downside games won't be that bad. 27 in a game where he didn't do too much. It's not ideal, but if you can go 27, 55, 32, 60 kind of thing, then
sounds like Luki, mate.
mate, better than Luki. He's not posting those 17-point games in 55 minutes. I'll throw Hosking to you last because I know you've been across Hosking for a while. I chucked him into the holds. I assume you agree with me here that he's a guy.
I actually traded him last week, but that's because I needed a pathway to get Mr. Jack to burn.
Well, that's last week. We're talking this week.
Now you hold him because he's playing round 16, and the thing is, a lot of Penrith players in Origin, which mean that they might look at Hosking to play a bigger minute role because they might put Salmon. For example, they might put Salmon in to replace Crichton or someone, and Salmon's the guy who's been leeching his minutes off the bench. Hosking is an interesting one because he hasn't really scored too well the last 5 weeks, but if you look at his PPM, it's so strong. Like he's scoring 50 or 45 to 50 in like 50, 60 minutes. So if he just had that 80-minute role, he would be like a 70-point player. He'd be like one of the best fantasy players available, right? So it's really hard saying a guy like that, but I think they've just made it pretty clear that they want Salmon in for God knows what reason, playing 20 minutes a game. Liam Martin's getting healthy, and Sorensen has been a beast. So there's not enough minutes in this second row rotation. But Hosking is good enough to just keep plugging away 50 points. You might as well hold him to around 16 and then trade him after that because he won't play 19. Or you hold him to like 18 because there's a bunch of dogs, sharks and tigers. So if you've got guys like Papali'i, Nikora, Preston who won't play 17, you might as well hold Hosking until then and trade him after. But look, he is a delight playing 80 minutes, but I just can't see that happening, which is a shame because, I think Hosking is actually a beast of a player. Like him and Cleary look like they've got a great combination. He's probably one I might look to start with next year. If Sorensen or someone move on, because I think he'll be a beast.
Well, you got to rest. You got to rest this week, so maybe he's back to 80 minutes. But yeah, you're right. The big problem for him is Salmon coming off the bench. Speaking of problems, look, that wraps up Buy, Hold, Sell. So let us know in the comments what problems you have this week. What trades are you looking at? What guys do you want to get rid of? Who are you trying to get in? What problems are you having? Let us know in the comments. We'll help you with those. And who are you thinking of captaining this week? Because Cleary backs up from Origin. So does Nico Hines. So does Payne Haas. It could be a tricky one. So we're here to solve all your problems on the Casual Athlete.